school. What is it? How do we make them work? And how can you be involved and help? Well, as you can see here, a prep school, it is all in the name. By that I mean the word preparatory, which is what prep is short for, means getting ready. And it's really important, I think, as parents to understand that prep schools are not just about getting children ready to go to the next school. You're at prep school for a long time. At my school, lots of the children start in reception at 4 and they leave at 11. So I don't want those 7 years just to be about the next school. It's got to be about a fantastic experience in itself. And it's here at the prep school that the foundations of learning for life are laid. If you can get it right, if we can get that right for your children, by the time they leave prep school, then they will be set up for a positive learning experience. It's not just about the content, though of course content is key and very, very important. But even more important is creating children who have a growth mindset, who have a positive approach towards learning. And that positive approach and that attitude will hold them in good stead no matter what they're faced with as they move on to the next school. So how do we do that? What does a prep school actually do? So an outstanding prep school, which is what you want, will enable dynamic and independent learning. Notice in this point the word dynamic. That's what's really important here. The definition of dynamic is a process or a system which is characterized by constant change, activity, or progress. And a dynamic person is positive in attitude and full of energy and new ideas. So an excellent school or an outstanding prep school is always looking at how to be even better and ensuring that every child gets what he or she needs. So you need somewhere that's going to enable that dynamic environment. And a dynamic school will also have teachers who are dynamic and positive and energetic. And that creates a really exciting environment. And therefore, children will love their learning. Second bullet point there, an outstanding school will inspire and motivate. Well, of course, the inspiring and motivating of children leads on from the first point. If you've got dynamic teachers who are really committed to supporting each and every child and their needs, then those children will be inspired and motivated. Engendering a love of learning. Now, this is the key thing. If you can make the children love learning, really want to learn, and that's motivated by themselves, not because somebody is, going to tell them off or punish them if they don't do it. It's got to grow from them, and that's what you're trying to do in a really good prep school. And developing a growth mindset. So in other words, helping the children to understand that they will sometimes find things difficult, and that's good. They will sometimes make mistakes, and that's good. All of those things, and this idea that you are growing all the time, and that getting it right all the time is absolutely not what it's about, because if you're getting it right all the time, then you're not learning. So that engendering a love of learning is absolutely vital. The other key thing of this is I mentioned about engendering a love of learning for its own sake. And what's really important there is that children are given opportunities to learn and investigate and explore. Notice all those active verbs, that they're able to do those things and they're not being spoon-fed. Now, by spoon-fed, what I mean is in some schools, everything is done for the children. They're given a book and they work through the book, which is very passive. They're told, I've been in lots of prep schools where they're almost told what to think. And that isn't going to lead to independent learners and children who are going to be able to cope later when somebody won't be telling them what to think. So you want them being confident enough to find out things for themselves. You want a school that will explore and develop the whole child. And by that, I mean academics and academic development is part of the whole, but it is part of the whole. The pastoral care, the development of that growth mindset is equally, if not more important. We all know the power of highly developed emotional intelligences. That's what we want these children to be. Nowadays, in our world, content is easy to find. You only need to go on the internet and you can find out anything you want. So a school is all about, or should be all about, helping the children to use that information well, to understand it for themselves. If you keep telling them everything and telling them what they think, they won't learn that skill. And finally, an outstanding school will explore and develop the whole child and promote critical thinking and independence of thought and action. So critical thinking, what do I mean by that? Well, an environment where creative thinking skills, and I'm thinking here of the skills of analysis, reflection, assimilation, and adaptation. If you can teach those skills to the children and they apply them in all sorts of situations, then they will be active learners. Let me give you an example. In a school where you have passive learners and the children are not being encouraged to think for themselves, you might, for example, say you were doing an English activity or a language activity where you were looking at adjectives. In many schools that I see as an inspector, you have a book and the sentences in the book have a gap in, and the child has to read the sentence. So, for example, it might say, in the park there were blank trees. Okay, and you might have to put in an adjective into that sentence. So you might put in beautiful trees. Fine. However, it's very passive. Most of the sentence has been done for you. You haven't had to think of that yourself. All you've had to think about is the adjective. Compare that with an activity where you have lots of nouns and lots of adjectives, and you, perhaps in a group or with a partner, have to discuss which adjective goes with which noun best and why. You have to justify your view and your opinion. Now that is active learning. So it's a very simple example of the difference between passive and active learning. And there, your critical thinking skills of justifying and analysing will come to the fore, and that will make for a very powerful lesson. Moving on to the learning environment. So is every school essentially the same? Well, I hope you can see from the video and from some of the things I've mentioned already this morning, the answer to that is no, definitely not. And again, I know this from running my own school, which has a very distinctive, non-competitive academic ethos, by which we mean no child is raised above another. So we don't have any prize giving, we don't have any exams, and the children are not put into sets or streams, but every child is taught individually. So that's one very distinct environment. Now, I'm not saying that has to be the case in a school, but what you should look for as parents is a learning environment where they can show you how they do the things they say they do. Every single school, if you look on websites of prep schools, every single school says, we have the best pastoral care, we do this brilliantly, we are amazing at this is really important to us. All fine. But when you go and visit the school or you look on the website, you've got to look for the hows. And what I mean by looking for the hows is when a school says, our pastoral care is the best of any school, you need to say, how do you make it the best? What do you do that makes it the best? That's the bit you want to know. Anyone can say it's the best. How do they achieve that? And then you'll get a little bit closer to understanding what goes on in the school. Again, a school might say, well, our learning is very exciting, or everyone has really fun learning. Well, how do they have fun learning? What is it that school does? What is it those teachers do that make it fun? In other words, how is it fun? How is it made fun? That's something you need to be really looking for. Also, you need to be looking for an invitation to inquire. In other words, when you ask questions as parents, are the responses very defensive? When you say, well, how do you do that? Or how do you make sure this is the best pastoral care? Are the responses from the school, well, they just are. Well, we just do that. If they can't explain it, it isn't happening. So you're looking for people at the school who are open-minded, who are willing to talk to you about what they do and, more importantly, how they do it. You're also looking for opportunities for children to inquire and think for themselves. Very easy way to look for this is if you look in a school and you're allowed to look at some children's exercise books, if every single book is exactly the same, I would suggest the invitation to work independently and to inquire is probably quite limited, and that's not what you want. The other thing you're looking for is evidence of self-directed learning. Right from the very beginning reception, are there opportunities for children to choose what they are going to look at, what they are going to do? Of course, there are times when everybody is doing the same thing, and of course, one has to teach certain things, no question about that. But are there opportunities for children to choose something that they're interested in? When they're doing their art, and it's going to be, say, they're learning about still life paintings, do they all have to paint the same things? Could the children not choose what they're going to paint? And doesn't that tell us something about the child in the fact of what they have chosen? So all of those things are things to look for when you're having a look around a school. I'm going to move on now to the next slide, which is about you as parents and the partnership and what part you play. And that word partnership is important. It is a partnership between the school and the parents. You're not sending your children to school to say, right, off you go. I'm not going to do anything anymore. I don't need to bother at all about my child now. The school is going to do everything. They're your child. Your children are your most precious possessions. And so you're not going to just give them away. You want to work with the school. And this is really important And one of the things I'm going to say now, and I will say it again in a couple of minutes, I am absolutely unequivocal. I will not be moved on the point that if you want your child to really develop as a whole person and to love their learning, you have to be involved. And it's you and only you, not an au pair, not the nanny, not a governess, not a tutor. Nobody will replace you in that, because it is so powerful for the children to know that their parent is taking an interest and is part of their child's journey. Now, many parents say they don't want to do that, they're not interested in doing that, and they don't want to take that part. Obviously, many parents are like that, and their children are fine, but they will never achieve or become everything they could become if you do get involved. Now, of course, there are lots of parenting styles, and I'm going to challenge you now to be really honest with yourselves and have a think about which sort of parent you are. And as an English specialist, I like to attach a character from literature to parenting styles. So I'm going to have a look at these, and you need to be very honest with yourself and think to yourself, which one am I? So the first one, the Scarlett O'Hara approach, the very spoilt, selfish Scarlett from Gone with the Wind. And the Scarlett O'Hara approach type parent says, oh, I've got 3 children, 4 children, 5 children, 1 child, 2 children. I cannot do anything with any of them as I'm too busy. So there are some parents in that category that have had lots of children. I have parents sometimes say to me, but I've got 5 children, as though they didn't, as though it was an accident. Presumably they planned to have 5 children. So you need to be taking on board the idea, if you've got that many children, it's going to take up an awful lot of work. Are you Jay Gatsby? So the very, very wealthy man from The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, who's so rich, he says, I pay the schools, so I expect them to do their job. It's nothing to do with me. I'm not interested. I'm just paying the money. Well, that is not going to lead to a very happy child. The Mrs. Dalloway approach. So Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway, who loved to throw parties. And she threw lots of parties because she liked to be busy. She didn't want to think. She just wanted to stay busy. So here, this approach can go too far the other way from the Jay Gatsby one that just leaves them to it. This parent says, I designate time with my children individually and together, but I'm not sure what to do with them. So I drive them to lots of different activities. So some parents just don't know what to do with their children. They think there is some special or magical thing that they need to do, which they don't. I will come on to that in a minute. But that parent says, so I'm going to be around for them, but I don't know what to do with them, so I'm just going to take them to lots and lots and lots of different classes and groups and clubs, and then somebody else can deal with them. So there's that one. And finally, the last one is the Atticus Finch approach. So Atticus Finch is from To Kill a Mockingbird, in my view, one of the best parents in literature. And the Atticus Finch approach is, I let the school do their job, but I spend time reading, discussing, and listening to my children to enhance their natural interests and to challenge them with new ideas. So this parent takes the time to listen and discuss and talk to their children. Atticus Finch, those of you that know the novel, works incredibly hard as a lawyer, but he still finds time to spend with his children. So you have to think to yourselves, which one of those am I? And can I be Atticus Finch? Because that's really what you want. And here I come back to this, I mentioned this before, the unavoidable truth. All children benefit from meaningful time with a parent. And there is no replacement for this. If I had £1 for every time a parent has said to me, but what can I do to help my child? And I say, spend 10 minutes a day with them, just individually talking to them. And they say to me, oh, I can't do that. They don't really want to be helping their child. Everybody can find 10 minutes a day. More is great. 10 minutes is plenty. And if you don't want to do that and you choose not to do that, then the partnership with the prep school is very much the Jay Gatsby one. You just leave it to them. But remember, you can't have it every which way. So in other words, if you're not going to put time in personally, then there's a limit to what you're going to get back. There's also a limit to what the school can do, because the school isn't you. So what you need to do is to be alert. And here you can see the word alert. So all you need to do in your 10 minutes a day with your child, along with finding them a fantastic prep school, which does all the things I mentioned earlier, is when they talk to you, answer them. Don't ignore them. Don't fob them off. That takes just as much time as giving them a proper answer. It also will drive you mad. Whereas if you actually answer the question, it'll take less time. If you don't know the answer, tell them that and find it out together. Listen to them. Be honest with yourself. How often do you actually listen to what your child is saying? Really listen rather than sort of drowning it out. I know sometimes you haven't got time to listen, but for 10 minutes or so a day, you definitely have. Engage with them. When you're with them, look at them. Look them in the eye. I see so many parents at my school who collect their children and they don't even look at them. They're so busy talking to their friends or looking at their watches or running off somewhere. They don't actually engage with them. And that is so powerful. When you collect your child, 30 seconds, look in their eyes, ask them how their day was and listen to their answer. Read with them. There is no replacement for this. The most able children are readers. And they read and they understand. And I don't mean read, send them off in a corner and let them read alone. Read with you, talk to you. You can find a book that is on a topic that they really love and talk about it together. And talk. Please talk to your children. Again, sometimes people forget they have these babies and they love babies, but they grow into little people who want to talk and engage. It's really important that you talk to your children. And again, by talking and listening, you can find out how they're getting on at school and what is happening at school. The more involved you are, the more they will tell you. If you're generally not interested, why should they tell you what they're doing at school? So I'm going to take questions in a moment, but before I finish, I just want to say the combination of finding a great prep school, which really lays the foundation for your child to develop their learning for life skills, combined with 10 minutes a day from you, will make for very happy and very successful children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. If we could start with the first question, Helen. What do you consider the essential abilities or skills a child or a student should have to face this challenging world? That's an excellent question.
It's a very good question, absolutely. And it is, in a sense, what I've been talking about at that beginning. So what a child needs, and you're right, this is a challenging world, and my goodness, we've seen that significantly throughout the world with the pandemic. You know, you never know what's going to happen. So what you need, the key skills are a child who is able to think for themselves. And that comes from the critical thinking skills I talked about, the opportunity to inquire. If they are waiting to be told what to do and how to do it all the time, they will never learn to think for themselves. So thinking for themselves is one. Understanding why learning is exciting and wanting to learn is another. And again, that comes from that opportunity to enjoy their learning, to understand that making mistakes is okay, that we all do that and that's how we learn. So that's the second thing I would say. The third thing is children need to feel secure and safe. All children need boundaries and structure. And the greatest thing you can give your children in that 10 minutes a day is your time and attention, because that means they will know they matter to you. And that is what makes them secure. And if you are secure, you will be confident. If your foundations are wobbly because nobody's paid you much attention, then you will never really become really strong. Of course, some people have had or experienced terrible adversity in their childhoods through no fault of their parents. So I'm thinking about immigrant children. I'm thinking about children who have been in war zones and have to survive and so on, have been orphaned in that situation. Now, that's a very extreme situation, and those children have to really fight to achieve what they achieve. And that's a slightly different sort of situation. But I'm talking about children who are essentially from homes where they have a parent or parents, and the parents want to help them and the parents want them to do well. And the one thing, if you can give them 10 minutes a day of your time out of anything else I've said, that is the thing, because if you give them that security, they will build on that.
We do have another question: how to engage the children of different abilities if you don't have different sets in classroom? Basically,
what you do is you have a class of children. Within the class, you've got a range of abilities. And what we do at Bute House, very successfully, is the teacher will, for example, looking at something like multiplication. So the teacher might be talking about the use of multiplication in worded problems in maths. So the teacher will teach a lesson that is what we call low threshold, high ceiling. So in other words, that the content is at one level, but the activities you can do go on and on and on, from very simple to more complex. Once you've done the main teaching part of the lesson, which might be 10 or 15 minutes, the children then work individually. Or if, they might be working in groups, but say they're working individually, what the teacher will have done is planned 3 or 4 different levels of activity. And depending on the child, they will be given an activity that is most suited to them. That way, always, the basic standard of the lesson is high. But when they come to do their independent work, the level of activity is absolutely catered to directly their needs. Compare this with setting. If you set children, so for example, you say there's set 1, set 2, set 3, set 4. First of all, you're immediately telling the children whether they are top, next top, lower or bottom. And by the way, people think, oh, but if you're in set 1, you're fine. Not at all. It's a huge pressure for those children. So they've been labelled. And if you label somebody, they will tend to live up to that label. So if I say you're in set 4 for maths, I am saying to you, you're not very good at it. You're the bottom group. So that child is now thinking, I'm not very good at maths. So when they come to do their maths, how much will they try? How much will they be put off very quickly? Pretty quickly, because I've already told them they're not very good at maths. So they're not going to keep learning, keep trying to fight that. Also, how do you decide? In your school, you might have 60 children, and you're saying that's set 1, 2, 3, 4. I know from the standard of children in my school, and for example, the standard of children in another prep school, children in their set 1 at the school down the road would be in my set 3. So it's meaningless. So you're much better off within the class teaching to what the individual children need. And yes, it is much harder work for the teachers. There is no doubt about that. But the teachers who work in schools like mine are committed to doing that because they understand how negative labelling can be. And as I say, being in set 1 doesn't make it okay either, because you have children then, and these schools do tests at the ends of terms and then change the sets. And children are devastated if they've been in set 1 and then moved to set 2. They're beside themselves. But why? For no reason. Rather than having an environment in which they're all learning and they're being given what they need. And that's one of the reasons why our standards are so high at Bute, is because even the weakest children do extremely well because nobody has told them that they're no good at it. We haven't labelled them. That's why we do it, and that's how we do it.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I myself, as a parent, have heard, in the primary school setting, some children saying to others, even that peer-to-peer level, that, oh, you're at the bottom set for this, you're not, that conversation is not helpful for either parties. Whether you're at the top set of people or the lower sets. So not labeling or give children the negative label is definitely one to remember. So it relates to the sets question. We also have one asked about, do you have sets in team sports?
So sport is a very different thing, because in sports, you have to, if you're going to play a match against another school, you've got to have 2 sets of children who are of similar abilities at the sports. However, what we do, because we are so dedicated to the idea of ensuring that everyone has an opportunity, we have lots and lots of opportunities for all children to play against other schools. And the children who aren't so strong naturally at a sport, we give extra time to help them get better at it if they wish to. So it's rather different in sport. But one of the great advantages of the way that we do things with the lack of competition between each other is when the children are put together in a team, they are amazing team workers. Because of course they're never against each other in the classroom. They only are there to support each other. So when they become part of a team for sport, for example, they're great team players.
Next question. Highly agree with your opinion about becoming a whole person. Would you also give some tips for how to help children to develop emotional, social skills apart from the academic skills?
Yes, so again, the emotional social skills, this really comes back to those early stages of education in the very early days in reception and year 1 and so on. where the children are given opportunities to do things independently. And so that includes playing. And what they need to do is be allowed to play and to choose what they're playing. And through that, for the teachers to help them to understand the different skills that are involved in playing together socially. In terms of emotional intelligence and developing those things, again, it's back to letting them think for themselves and giving them opportunities to think for themselves. And from your point of view as parents, the listening and talking to them, because that's how the children can discuss ideas and you can help them to understand those ideas. If you never talk to them, you don't know what they think is suitable or not. And emotional intelligences come from opportunities to interact with others and being given enough independence and freedom to do so that they can then learn how you do that. In addition, skills like empathy and perseverance and collaboration, those sort of skills need to be taught explicitly. And in a really good prep school, teachers will refer to those skills, you know, actually with that kind of language from the very earliest stages. You know, so you might say to a child, what would be a kind thing to do would be to think about your friend's problem. You're basically teaching them empathy there. And from the youngest years, I promise you, they will use this sort of language. They will understand. So it needs to be taught explicitly. And as parents, you can do the same. You can talk about, if you play with your brother really well and you share things, it's called collaborating. And that's a brilliant thing to do. And then you can praise them specifically. Well done, you collaborated really well. I promise you they will learn the language very, very quickly. But doing that, again, takes your time. But that is a very powerful thing to do.
Yes, thank you, Helen. I always think as a parent of supporting the children's learning experience, something I've done very much, like you said, intentionally. So we do this, we arrange this. And often I also think there's lots of things actually as a parent influence and impact your children's upbringing. It's also through your own activities, behavior unintentionally. So you almost a role model. Sometimes, as you said, children do listen, children do watch. So you yourself become the role model of your to influence your children's behavior and that growing up experience, I suppose. We have time for maybe just final one or two questions here. The next one is Bute House girls are growing up in a non-competitive environment. However, they have to face 11+ exam. How do you support them mentally to overcome this challenge? You do have secrets there because you have amazing 11+ results. So tell us about it, Helen.
I think our results are because they are taught in the way that they are. They are not competing with each other. We don't even do exams at Bute. We don't have any exams. The only time the girls see an exam paper is in year 5, around this time of year. So when we go back to school next week, we will be showing them some exam papers in year 5, and they will have a few practices of exam papers, not many, maybe 3 or 4, before they do the exams in January. And the reason for that is we know we have taught them everything they need to know. What we will do when we show them the exam paper is talk about how you time your amount of time that you've got, how you use your time. But other than that, we don't go on and on about it because essentially we trust them. We know that they know what they need to know because we know that we've taught it to them. So that's how the results are so successful. And also our girls don't become so stressed because if you're constantly testing and examining them, they get in a panic. Our girls don't get in a panic because they're not being tested all the time. So it really works that when they do have to go and sit an exam, they just take it in their stride. They just think, well, we've been taught all this, we'll just go and do the exam, it's fine. And that's why they do so very, very well. I mean, I think, sometimes parents say to me, when they've been in that environment at Bute, what happens when they're at senior school? Well, I can tell you our girls go on to the most competitive senior schools in the country and they love it. They're absolutely fine. But what they never become is obsessed about who's top, who's this, who's that, who's won this. They just don't because they've never done that. They're very happy if they win something. They're happy if somebody else wins something. But that isn't what it's about. They've understood it's about what I need for me. It doesn't matter if I've come first and you've come second. It doesn't matter. What does that mean? What matters is that I've achieved what I want to achieve. So from that sort of upbringing, they manage themselves really beautifully. It's a really very, very positive thing. I cannot tell you the damage that all these tests and exams do to children that schools insist on doing all the time. And also all the time spent doing exams when they could be teaching them. Exams are just learning stuff and then regurgitating it. That's all it is. So why would you spend all your time doing that? Why don't you just keep teaching them things? So that's our view. And we see the children graduate into the senior schools hugely successfully. So we know it works.
Beautiful. We have a final quick question here. Should children learn music instruments? How many hours practice is sensible each day?
I think learning musical instruments is fantastic if they want to and they're interested in learning them. Absolutely. Depends why you want them to learn and if they want to learn. If you want them to learn because that means that when they're 11, they might get a place at a better school, that's not a good reason. If you want them to learn because they're interested in the piano and they like the sound of it and they want to enjoy it, then yes. And I think you say to a child, if you're going to pay for some piano lessons, for example, then you discuss it with the child. If I'm going to do this, then you're going to have to practice. If you don't practice, you're not going to get better. So, I'm not going to pay for these lessons unless you're going to commit to do your part of it. And yes, they should do a certain amount of practice a day. I mean, I think it depends. I've got girls who actively like playing the piano so much they'll play for ages every day. There's no problem at all. I think the amount of time, my view, I would listen to what the music teacher says, but it's got to be about if it becomes a real struggle every day of you making them do their 10 minutes of piano or whatever it is, there's no point, there's no value in it. So set it up right in the first place at the beginning. Okay, would you like to learn the piano? Or the child says, I really want to learn the piano. Okay, why do you want to learn it? Well, my friend's learning it, not a good reason. I like the sound of it, fair enough. Or I'd like to learn an instrument because I'm interested, fine. Then talk about, we'll do a deal, that's fine, I'm really happy to pay, but you need to do some practice every day. Do you understand that? That's every day, you need to do some practice. Yes, Mum, I understand, great. 2 days in, no practice, have a discussion. Do you remember we talked about and so on. But yeah, I think instruments are amazing things. But if it becomes a thing, it depends, as I say, why, and you as parents have to be honest. Do I want my daughter to learn the piano so that she can maybe get a music scholarship somewhere? Is not in and of itself a good reason.
Thank you, Helen. It's just before the webinar, we were talking about taking my son to his violin teacher this morning, who surprised me, volunteered to have another lesson. So then you, as a parent, of course, you feel surprised because you thought this is a hard work. B, then you think, I have to do this for him. So I have to move my time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to arrange my meeting.
Yeah. Because that's come from him.
Yes.
He wants that. So then it's for a good reason.
Yes.
You're saying, oh, I think you should learn another instrument and another. I see children at school who are absolutely weighed down by music lessons, ballet lessons, dance lessons, drama lessons. It's too much, so think carefully.
Again, I think what's a wonderful talk, Helen. When we were discussing this, I said, I'm not going to be a QED founder to have this conversation. I want it to be a mother to listen. I want to be a mother to learn. I certainly have learned a lot. If they're not completely new, and I think they're a useful reminder. Sometimes when we're working parents like myself have to deal with, how much stuff I have to deal with. But you often forget. You do actually have that 5 seconds to stop and think about your 2 children, and you do have time to do something to support even some little things. It will make a huge difference. So personally, thank you very much as well, Helen.
My pleasure.
I hope our parents in the audience have also had some takeaway from Helen.
I hope so. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.